realize when you're raising money, you're giving away part of your business, part of your idea, part of your business, right? And depending on what you're raising, do you need more money? You have to be able to figure this out. So I didn't get into it for the story, but everything has a story. And yes, stories don't have to be so personal like mine were. It's nice if they were, because it does tug at the heartstring. But ultimately, if you're an expert in an industry, tell the reason why you got in it, why you're starting on your own, why you feel like.
This episode is all about pitching your idea, venture capitalism, investing in companies, and kind of what you need to do as far as a small company to go out and pitch your idea and get that information out there. And, Jon, obviously you have probably a tremendous amount of stories and things that you could share. And that's why I thought this would be a really good episode to do now. We've talked about some of this stuff on some of the other episodes. And I think that this is kind of the next logical step to start talking about this part of the process.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So aside from my business world and being a CEO of a behavioral health company, and on my fifth sale of a company, I'm also a partner in a VC firm, and was one of the founders of that VC group. And there's so many stories. We started off kind of as angels, and I'll explain what an angel investor is, as opposed to a VC, as opposed to even a private equity investor. But sure. My story kind of comes out of, be careful what you ask for. There's probably two parts to the story. One is be careful what you ask for. Be careful who you get investing in your company. And the other part of the story really is about pivoting. So two things kind of came out of this. This is a story of a company that the fund invested in. I actually also invested personally in it, and I got a board seat on in the company. And what was interesting was, aside from my group investing, there was another venture capital fund that invested, and man, they were just brutal. They were just brutal to the CEO that started the company. The company was only about 4 months in, and they were berating him at board meetings. And I literally had to sit with the entrepreneur and actually spend time with him, kind of talking him off the roof a little bit, because he was, very beat up every time he talked to this private venture capital fund. And I think it's a lesson, and we'll talk about it later, but it's a lesson in making your choices and who you want to invest in and what does that mean. But it went on for, they invested probably about 4 months in, and it went on for a good year. Monthly, we had board meetings, and the CEO was just getting beat up every turn. Business wasn't working out great. Things were tough. But, I knew I had the belief in the entrepreneur. I just knew that this guy was going to make it.
And we've talked about that on other episodes about, you're able to kind of see things that some other, people like in the, in your venture capitalist, venture company, that they might not see, that stand out to you. I think that's, it's a good, feature that you're able to bring to the picture,
I saw a lot of promise in the entrepreneur, and we were able to, it was weird. I mean, about a year in, we were able to, things weren't working out, and he was looking to pivot. And when we talk about pivoting, it means, pivoting in basketball means keeping your foot on the ground, but moving the other foot, right? Sure. Moving, making a little bit of a switch. And his business model wasn't necessarily working, but there was technology that he developed for the business model that was kind of unique. And I saw that, and I kept saying, we need to discuss what this could be. And through one of my contacts, I reached out to a organization. And I said, "Do you guys know of this kind of technology that exists?" And they kind of stepped back and said, "No, we don't."
Mm.
And what we were able to do was actually pivot to that technology, even though that was not a revenue source for us. And I got in contact with another company that wanted to see the technology. We showed it to them. They said to us, "Okay," and the company I invested in was in Philadelphia, and we're close to New York City here. And I said, this is told them about what we were doing, and they said, "We're going to be in New York." And the CEO called me and said, "I'm going to be in New York I'm flying in about 9 o'clock that evening, and I have meetings all day. But if you guys want to catch me at 10 o'clock at the hotel I'm at, I'll spend time with you." So I got this gentleman to drive all the way from Philly to New York to actually sit with this guy. And it was an amazing story because he ended up wanting to buy the company and literally wrote on the back of a napkin. And he was probably an hour and a half late. So we didn't get that meeting till about 11:30. By
At night.
11:30 p.m.
Wow.
And by 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, we signed an agreement on the back of a napkin and was able to sell the company literally within, about 2 weeks.
Wow.
Very little due diligence had to be done. It was a startup company, and it was a really nice win. But I guess the real story around that was really me protecting the CEO, the founder CEO of the company from the board that was beating him up. And then of course when he got the sale and there was money to be made, they were the first on board going, "See, we told you." But the reality was, yeah, right. So the reality was, it was just, ultimately a move. He stayed positive, and I felt like I kept him positive through that process.
Yeah.
And got him to travel and do this deal, and he never looked back. It was really a nice win, and those are the type of things that you look at and you go, "Wow." I needed. You need to invest in people, and in their case, they invested in kind of a bad investor, and with me, they invested in a good investor because I was all about helping the founder and entrepreneur get through this. I knew the beatings he was taking, he wasn't going to last long, and we got it right to kind of a weird finish line that was a benefit. Everybody benefited. So it's kind of an interesting story because you really need to make decisions on the money. If you are raising money, what that looks like.
Right.
And, so we could kind of talk about pitching your idea, talking about, what a VC is looking for, or an angel investor, or even, even private equity. And I can explain those things as well.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that stands out too about what you just said, and, we've talked about this in pretty much almost every single episode that we've done so far, is the belief that you need to have as an entrepreneur in yourself, and just in what the product is. And I think, like you said, there's a part of that process that you saw something in the entrepreneur. And was it that you felt that you needed to kind of work with them because you didn't want them to feel so dejected because of what the board was actually doing, and saying, "Hey, listen, you have something here, don't lose that belief," because that's such a critical part of the process of being a successful entrepreneur and having a successful startup, or even going into a purchase or whatever, or an acquisition. Did they have, one of the things too that we've talked about is having a purpose, or a story behind the company. Was there something there that you saw also that stood out? That
yeah,
kind of
yeah. for sure. I mean, there was a great there was a great story. There was, it was all those pieces that came together. He was, we talk about the jockey and the horse. He's the jockey. A lot of people in my fund weren't necessarily excited about this company. As a matter of fact, I was working with a guy at the time who was like so negative on the investment, but I ignored him, and I did my own investment into the company as well. So, I mean, hey, I'm not always right, and I'm not trying to go with the fact that, hey, I did everything right. In this case, I did do everything right. But ultimately, I do make mistakes. I have invested in bad stuff less as I've learned those negative investments, those great ideas don't always work, especially if you don't have the right jockey. You have a great idea and you got a great, powerful CEO, and we have a couple of them that we've invested in. One of the companies I can't wait for it to get to the end zone, because I think it's going to be a big one, and it's all because of the entrepreneur. It literally, again, that particular company is very similar. They didn't necessarily have a sexy business model, but at the same time, you don't need that. You just need a great entrepreneur that's willing to plug away and make it work. And with the idea of being able to pivot. I mean, pivoting is interesting because every business I've been in, I've pivoted. I started off doing something. NHA, my biggest win, company I created and so forth, started out differently than where it ended. And it was a tribute to being able to ride the wave and try to figure out how to best get the customer to accept the offering. And so I had to change up things. But it was all good. And that's one of the reasons too, Craig, I talk about not scaling right away, because you need that room to flex and pivot and move around and to see, is this the right angle? Is this the better angle? Those are to me really important.
Right. You said another thing that's very interesting is that the business wasn't a sexy business model. It was really the entrepreneur behind it. In your experience, because I'm trying to learn this too, and that's one of the reasons that I'd like to get this wisdom from you, because I'm going down that path and have been on that path multiple times, and have segued off of it here and there. But when you think about the businesses that have pitched you and or pitched the board and all that kind of stuff, obviously not everything's a yes, and even the yeses are not always a success. Do you find that everybody that comes in though thinks that their idea is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and you kind of have to tell them like, okay, it's not too easy to recreate the wheel. You can try to create a better version of the wheel or a more efficient version of the wheel, but what is it that kind of stands out, or the thing that really lets okay, this is potentially a really good idea, and this is potentially a really good entrepreneur, or the complete opposite, this is a really bad idea, and I can't believe that you've actually made it this far, type of thing.
Yeah, interesting. I probably it's again, when someone's pitching their business, you want them to be able to paint the picture of the business. You don't necessarily need to be flashy. You don't need to be a good fundraiser, right? And raising funds. You need to be a good operator of a business, right? You need to really have an ability to explain the business to the investor and to themselves. This is a huge thing.
Sure.
Show the path to success. Really being able to understand the path that's going to be successful, and telling that story around that. So you're also talking about the story, which we always talk about, but the ability to explain the business, how it runs, how you see it running, whether it's if you're early on, what do you see? Um, show the path to success. Whether that's your numbers, your volume, whatever. Um, we talked about this in early episodes, which is the word traction.
Mm.
So, so traction can mean many things to many people. To me, traction means what are you doing to advance the business? What are some of the things? Is it, if you really think about it, is it is traction related to sales? Could be. Is it related to a lot of pilot programs you have going on, and that have the ability to convert to regular business? Could it be that you have, whether it's some type of web tech business, that people are using the freebie version really well, or the people are engaging, you got eyeballs on your website? That could be traction. So traction can mean a lot of different things. You got to define it when you're talking to a investor, and to yourself when you look in the mirror. Um, you got to be able to tell that story. You got to be able to read the room, understand who's there, what investors, what you know, what does the investor want to know. And I think in starting a business, those answers have to be there. You have to do that to yourself before you even get in front of an investor.
Right.
And so you got to create the story. Why did you start the business? That's one of them. Your goals around the business, and what are your personal goals?
Right. So preparation, obviously, before going in, is obviously going to be critical. Like you said, being able to read the room and being able to pivot then and say, okay, this is going better than I thought. It's not going as well as I thought. And, what do I do now? So you kind of have to plan that out. But I think, even before that, I think one of the biggest questions that I have, and I would assume that I'm not the only one that would have this question, is when you're a startup or when you're a business, when is it kind of the ideal time to go out and look for actual getting an investment, as opposed to, is it too early to go out and try to get an investment? So what do you think is there a kind of a guideline that a company should be doing? Obviously traction is going to play a big part in that. But is there a right time, or maybe the better question is there definitely a wrong time to start doing it? Maybe that's the better.
Yeah. I mean, you realize when you're raising money, you're giving away part of your business, part of your idea, part of your business, right? And depending on what you're raising, do you need more money? You have to be able to figure this out. So you could raise money in the beginning, and I'll get into details about angels and venture capital and even private equity, but mostly we'll talk about angels. And then there's different classes of angels. I'll explain that. But angel investors are, just quickly, angel investors are friends, we call friends, family, and fools. So these are people that will fund an idea, not necessarily something with traction. Although there is a different class of angels called like super angels, which will get, they're kind of in between a really early stage and a VC.
Okay.
And venture capital is, of course, an adolescent company, but that has traction. Good way to describe it, right? So you can go angel, super angel, VC. Super angel is a little bit more like there's some traction, great idea, some traction, but
Gotcha.
but you got to realize you're giving away part of the idea, the business. So if you look at this and try to figure out, hey, I got to raise a round of funds to get us to here, and I got to raise more money to get us to here, and then another round of funding. So you got 3 rounds of funding. I'm going to give away 20% of the business each round. Okay, at the end, I got 40% of the business I own.
Right.
So those are, to me, things you have to think about before you go out and pitch. There are great companies that we've got involved in where they go, we're only giving away 20%. We think we want one investment. We don't need more money. And the CEO is going to maintain or at least control 80% of the business. The founder. So those are all things that need to be considered. Can you do without investors? Yeah. I mean, every business I started, there wasn't an investor.
Right.
I'm a little old school. Early on, investors didn't even exist. Angels, really. I mean, angel investing is kind of interesting because angel investing came out of Broadway plays, people that invested in Broadway plays back in the 50s and 60s. They were called angel investors. And then then angel investor became part of anybody that invested in an early stage business. So,
oh, wow. That's interesting.
So that kind of has its roots to New York and Broadway.
Yeah, no, I never, I've obviously heard the term before, and I've, I've heard you mention it, multiple times. And, that's kind of what the angel investor, I think, like you said, it's, the friends, the family, hey, it's a pretty good idea. Maybe. Yeah. Something else that you mentioned earlier was you have to understand business, or at least, for the most part. Now, I've talked to a lot of people, especially with, with what I do with a lot of the, the consulting and coaching that I do with, with YouTube and personalities and things like that. I can see there's a lot of people out there that have really good ideas. They don't know the first thing about business. They don't, they might have that entrepreneurial spark that they, they feel like they're being pulled to do something different than sitting behind a desk all day or whatever it might be. But their business sense is limited. It may be limited as even, is giving them a little bit more credit. Would you think at that point that would be where an angel would kind of come in and say, okay, this is where I can lend some of my expertise because of this? Or is that, how does that work? Cause I mean, I'm sure that's what's happened before, where you're like, this is a great idea, but you don't know shit about business, bro.
Yeah. No, it happens often. And again, I would invest in those type of businesses if I saw the spark of the entrepreneur and I realized that, hey, he's a little bit, just starting out, doesn't understand all the pieces, which is a good thing in a lot of ways, right? You want somebody that's not jaded with what's going on in the world, but at the same time, you want somebody that's willing to learn, to absorb, and that's where I said smart money as opposed to just money. If you're just looking for money and you're not looking for anybody to support you and help you, that's the wrong path. If somebody just throws money at your idea and you don't really know where to use the proceeds for, you need to really look for someone that either is in that industry or has the chops, and been around enough to understand. Right. I mean, there are some cool businesses out there that I've looked at, where the entrepreneur is just super creative, but he didn't have the business sense. So you got to know yourself, that emotional intelligence, right? The whole concept of knowing who you are and what you are. I knew when I started all my businesses early on, especially the crashes and burns.
Sure.
I didn't have those skills. I didn't have skills that would, I just wanted to be successful, but I didn't know how to do financial. I didn't understand the operational piece of the business. I was very good at strategy and getting people excited over something, but I didn't have the other skills. And, it took me a long time to even know that I didn't have those skills. I thought, I could do everything. So
do you think that's a reason? Do you think that's a reason why your belief in, or your kind of philosophy on scaling, do you think that was what formulated that? Is kind of like, listen, like I needed to learn a lot. And if somebody's coming in here and starts talking about, oh, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to do, and they don't have that stuff figured out, is that kind of like a red
Yeah,
flag in
that's why
your mind?
I'm a big, early stage. I'm a big, I'm really negative on scaling. That word is used way too much in private equity. In venture capital mostly. It's way too much. You do need to know how to scale. You need to figure it out at some
Yeah,
point,
right.
but not in the beginning, not in the early stages. You need that room to pivot, to move. You could create some systems for certain things that you're doing, which could eventually lend itself to the scaling model. But you
Mm-hmm.
got to be able yeah, ultimately, exactly what you said. You need that room. You need that room to breathe,
Sure.
and go from there.
Um, when it comes to, I don't know how many, companies or individuals have pitched you or the board and different things. I'm assuming it's had to have been, many, many times. Is,
Thousands. Yeah.
is there, is there something that like, right away that this is just somebody looking for a cash grab as opposed to somebody that's looking, like you said before, like, are you coming in there just because you're trying to just get funds, but
Yeah.
it's going to end up getting squandered? Are there
Yeah.
certain things that you look for or that stand out to you? That's just like,
Yeah.
this is
It goes
terrible.
back to like fool me once and fool me, you can't fool me again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the investors in our fund, the partners in the fund, um, we've gotten so good at that. And it's only because of experience, not because we're this bright group. But we have an interesting group of people. I mean, some of them are entrepreneurs like myself. Some of them come from the banking world.
Mm-hmm.
Came already from finance. So it's a good mix. We don't necessarily always agree. So it's some battles. It's usually the entrepreneurs, the guys who've sold their companies and everything, where we hold court. And so there are different types of investors. The VC firm that I was talking about, that was kind of beating up this entrepreneur, none of them were ever entrepreneurs before. I knew their
Mm.
backgrounds. They were banking guys, investment guys that got into it, but they didn't really understand how to work with an entrepreneur. And
Mm.
it's funny that particular venture capital fund doesn't. They never renewed and created another fund after that one fund. They were done.
Oh, really?
I could have told you that, but
Right. You
I
saw
could
that coming
tell.
from a mile away. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. They were
So,
just kind of acting tough.
yeah. So you said that you've really seen hundreds or if not thousands of businesses and pitches and things like that. What's the typical percentage of companies that you end up seeing and you're like, okay, is it like out of 50 companies, maybe there's one that looks promising, but maybe it's out of 100 there's only one that you actually choose? Is that typical, or what's kind of the ratio
Yeah,
that you see?
our ratio has changed a lot because we've gotten better at screening. Um, so our fund is a little bit more. We have a screening committee. I'm no longer. In the beginning, it was always we screened everything. We were an angel fund first. We were actually, so we did a lot of really early stage stuff, and then we turned into a VC fund about 3 years ago. Um,
Is that
we are
considered
much.
scaling? Is that considered scaling in that way? Kind of starting off as an angel and then moving it is into
Yeah,
VC.
yeah, I guess, yeah. No, I think, what we learned is, we learned venture capital is a little bit more, your odds are a little better of success because you're not catching businesses with just the idea mode. You're actually into traction mode, right? So part of the move was to do that is, because angel is huge numbers. So now you kind of whittle it down a little bit. Venture capital is, now you want to look at companies that are adolescent, but they've got some juice. They're making things happen. Um, so but to bring my point back, our screening is different. So we get a higher percentage that we do move into due diligence and investing in because we screened them better in the beginning. So we did go through a time where we were doing it all. So we were screening ourselves, moving them in, and then doing the due diligence. We actually now have screening. Um, you know, we have an investment committee, which is basically the founders of the fund to kind of make a decision, and then we hand it off to a due diligence group, and then it could fail during due diligence as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, out of 20, we might get 4 or 5 that they move into a due diligence after screen. Talking about 20 after screening may go into due diligence, and out of that maybe half we'll invest in. So
Interesting. And then obviously it's going to be, is it very similar to like how something on like Shark Tank works, where they're looking for a certain percentage or offering a certain percentage, and then you kind of go through the negotiation in that process and say, okay, well, this is what we're going to do, but for this.
Yeah, Shark Tank is very is pretty real. I mean, you got the personalities there and everything. It's a little more showy.
Sure.
But ultimately, same thing holds true. If you don't know your numbers, I mean, they're catching these companies. They do get screened before they go on Shark Tank. But you're getting people. I mean, just recently we got a company through screening, and we started asking them their numbers. Their what's it cost to get a customer? What's your acquisition costs? And they couldn't even figure it out. And it was just like, they're done. If you come in, if you don't know what your profit margin is, that this particular company was making money, literally had customers, and we're like, so what at the end of the year, what are you going to make? And they took so long to try to figure it out. I'm like, we're not here for you to start figuring it out now. You should have came in with that.
Right. What are the so somebody reaches out, whatever, you say, okay, we're gonna bring you in to to talk about your business and all that kind of stuff. What's some of the key things that a company should prepare for, and also know, okay, we really need to make sure that we know this for sure. We can come back with maybe some other information, like maybe that you would expect, and say, okay, that's fine that you don't know this, going back and figuring what are those key things that you need to really, you're going to come in the first meeting or whatever. What are those things to really prepare yourself?
Like I said, you need to know your numbers, right? You really need to know your numbers. You got to show that you're focused around the business. You got to show that you're and again, this is my opinion. But you got to show that you're not so wide, a mile wide and an inch deep. You got to be, better to be an inch wide, a mile deep. Be focused, be laser focused, be able to answer those basic questions on acquisition costs and so forth. If not, have a good theory around it. Spend time. It's always prep. You got to prep for everything. When I was an athlete and playing football and everything, it was, practice was important.
Sure.
The games were great, and that was, that's where you showed off your practice. But you need to be, you need to commit to being an entrepreneur, and whether that's reading great books and absorbing things, or you got to show. Ultimately, you got to show a commitment, and you could tell. At least I can tell who's committed and who's not.
Yeah.
I mean, understand your industry. Be an expert at your industry. They talked about those 10,000 hours, right? It's nice to know when somebody's on that path, whether they're going through the 10,000 hours. But you really do. So it's, understanding the business they're in, understanding the hard work it takes to get there, keeping the concept around being focused, here's where you're going, here's where you're going. I mean, and being able to tell the story, right? The emotional part of the business.
Right.
Those are
And,
all.
and you kind of you've mentioned this on previous episodes too, that the story that you have now for multiple things that you've been involved in, you've figured those out, and you realized, okay, there's reasons why I get involved in certain industries and so forth, but it didn't occur to you until there was an actual instance that you ended up sharing your story with somebody, and people kind of like came out of the woodwork, which is
Yeah.
like, that's amazing. um but prior to that, that was something that you kind of figured out on your own.
Yeah.
Do you think that uh every business has, or every entrepreneur has a story that maybe they just haven't figured out yet?
Yeah.
Or or maybe their story is just that they're, they just you want to take the easy way out and just try to get funding and squander it or something like that. But and do you feel that if a person can figure out that story behind the drive of what they're doing, or like you said, understanding the industry and realizing, my story is that I knew that the industry was going this direction, but I saw it from my experience that it wasn't actually it was going to go and that's why I started this. Like, especially with
Yeah.
things like AI right now. AI is, so many people are worried about, losing their positions at jobs and things like that. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, well, if you're thinking that and realizing that that's going to happen, why wouldn't you try to do something about that and create the software or the technology
Yeah.
that's going to do that, and sell that as a license to protect yourself and maybe protect some of the people that are your friends that you work with, or whatever it might be, or the industry in a whole,
Yeah.
all those type of things. Is that, is that a story, being able to know your industry that well and just say, this is what I knew was going to happen,
Yeah.
and I just prepared for it. And I think maybe a lot of people don't even realize that that's their story, and forget to even mention that.
Yeah. No, you hit it right on the nose. I mean, you got to learn, you got to know what your business model is about. And you got to know the industry, and you got to, when I say you got to have a story, it's not like you make up something, right?
Right.
So it's more of, you know, I got this idea. I want to create this business. The story doesn't just drop. I mean, some of my stories are kind of very personal, right? They're very personal. I talked about my brother's suicide and why I got into behavioral health. I talked about my grandmother's black and blue mark, whatever, 30 some odd years ago,
Right.
um, and how it really kind of got me um, creating something. But yeah, my story, just like you said, my concept around my story didn't come until late in my business, when I just kind of was was in a position to tell a story, and I didn't realize how it hit, and
Sure.
how it held on, and how people wanted to hear it more, and how people were asking me, tell this guy your story, and then it became like like a folk tale or something. And still to this day, people will go like, tell me your story about how you started that uh, certification healthcare company, or
Mm-hmm.
tell me the story how you got involved in the behavioral health industry. Wow, that's interesting. So I didn't get into it for the story, but everything has a story. And yes, stories don't have to be so personal like mine were. It's nice if they were, because it does tug at the heartstring. But
Sure.
ultimately, if you're an expert in an industry, tell the reason why you got in it, why you're starting on your own,
Mm.
um, why you feel like, you know, there was somebody said, I want to be like, there was recently, I met with a young guy, and I do this often. I spend a lot of time with young people, and he was telling me about what he wanted to start a business. But first thing he said to me was, I really don't want to work. I really want to. Everybody got this concept. I want to create passive income,
Mm.
um, and I get it. Everybody wants to create passive income. You got to work hard to get to that point.
Right.
Knock on wood in my life, I have passive income. I have investments that I've done from the sales of my businesses, but that wasn't my goal. My goal was to build the business, um, And for me, I think, Craig, and I think you know this about me too. It's never for me. It's not the end game. It's more the journey.
Sure.
The
Yeah.
process of creating, and that's what I like to hear when somebody's pitching us. I don't necessarily want to hear exactly what their end game is. I mean, it's nice to hear, hey, I'd like to sell the company at some point and live the American dream. As an investor, I want that.
Sure. Right.
But ultimately, I have to hold myself back from that. That's not as important to me as it is that they want to build a business and they have a motive to build that business. They have a story behind the business and all that.
Gotcha. What, if you could narrow it down to the ideal situation or the ideal candidate that kind of walks in the door, is there something that they could have, and then they could have the complete opposite of what you look for, but you say, well, because of this, like you kind of mentioned it before with that first company, that the board kind of body slammed them and beat the crap out of them the entire time, and but the entrepreneur behind it is what stood out to you, and kind of seeing like, okay, this guy's going to go somewhere, or this girl's going to go somewhere, or whoever it was.
Yep.
Is there one thing that holds more weight than anything else that would be beneficial for an entrepreneur, regardless of where they are, whether they're in the baby part of it or the mature part of it, that you would say is probably the most important thing that you could have that could make an investor, regardless of what level, if it's angel all the way up to VC or private equity, that stands out to be the number one thing that they would need to have?
I mean, for me, it's that ability, that ability to be, as I said, ability to be a great entrepreneur, and what that looks like to me is, the understanding of the business, the explanation of the business, the story around the business. Other investors look at the business model like, oh, this tech is great. I don't look at that. We talked about sexy, right? I don't look at the sexy stuff. If it's sexy and there's a great story behind it, I'm all in. Don't believe me, I'm not just looking for boring. But I find entrepreneurs and founders that really are pushing away. The for me, I guess it's the explanation of traction. What traction they have probably is a big turn on for me as an investor that would want to invest in the companies. If you could prove your model out, that's cool. You're a smart guy, a smart gal. You got a great, um, you know, someone who has a great concept, and at the same time smart. All those things stand out. So it's hard to give you an exact answer because you got to be in the room,
Sure.
and you got to get an understanding of where they're going. But ultimately, it's that entrepreneurial spark that a woman or a guy will project, and that will get me excited.
Do you think that they had to have been through the trenches yet to make it something interesting, or do you pretty much know, okay, like, hey, you're at a pivotal point where
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna hit a trench soon,
Yeah.
but I think that you have the story or the purpose behind the business that's going to allow you to push through that, but it's coming. Are you able to kind of foresee, if they haven't yet,
Yeah, it's
that?
kind of a catch-22 for investors, right? They go, oh, you failed at this. It may not be good. I look at the opposite. I'm like, oh, okay, they failed. What'd you learn?
Mm,
So that's a question I'll ask. Like, all right, you went down this path. What did you learn? What did you take away with you from that initial business that failed? That for me, it was all about failing and kind of learning from my failures, failing multiple times, but never making the same mistake. Want to see that for
right.
sure.
Are there like a list, because I know that you're a person like me that likes to write down different things and analyze and take notes when you're learning about. Are there a list almost of some standard questions that you always ask? when you meet somebody, or is there like a few of them, or is there one that really is like asked at every single meeting, and then from there, you might iterate, and change the next bunch of questions, but are there a few that stand out to you that you feel like you ask every time?
I mean, I do ask them about themselves personally. I do I do ask about their strengths and weaknesses. You want people to be aware of what they're good at. And then I spend a lot of the time listening. After I ask those questions, I'll go, let's see if that really is a strength or a weakness. Oh, I'm really good at this. And then they get up and project themselves about something, and you're going, they're not really that good at it. They don't know themselves that well.
Sure.
Right. So there is those are the standard questions. I don't necessarily go in with a list, but I do have certain questions. A lot of it's personal because you just want to understand them, where they've been.
So the entrepreneur plays a huge part in it. The belief in themselves, the story. But is there something for you that, you might see, rainbows pouring out of the entrepreneur? Everything might look good, but you just say to yourself, this is not the business for me. This is not something that I would ever, invest in.
There are times where you look at something and go, I don't even see this business model working. And that's usually when I don't have faith in that person. So I'll look at.
Well, is there actually I've heard people say, when I've been doing my research, that some people are like, I would never invest in this type of company because it's too volatile. I heard a significant part about that, especially when COVID hit and all the lockdowns happened. They're like, I would never invest in restaurants because restaurants are just one of those things that's very difficult to do, and I just don't feel like it's in my expertise or whatever. But is there a specific type of business that you would be like, I love the entrepreneur, they look, but I just can't get behind this business model because it's too volatile, or it's just I just don't feel like it would work, or that I could offer enough to it, or is there something that stands out that
I told my wife,
a business model?
I told my wife to shoot me if I ever invest in a restaurant. So, so that is,
maybe you were probably one of those people that I heard that from then too. Yeah.
No, I you know what? It's more of a fear of mine, to be honest. I think I'm in awe. I really step back. People could say, hey, you're really successful. You've done this. You've built 5 companies. You're involved on boards. You've sold companies. I've been through all this stuff. But I'm in awe. I'm not, it's not an industry that I hate. I'm in awe of a great restaurant. I think it's, it's like a Broadway play with the ability to solve problems all night. Like, so you got a script, and you got everybody's moving in rotation. I've read a lot of books, just read a really great book called, Unreasonable Hospitality. And, it was written by, William Gita. And, I think I said his last name right. He was but what was amazing about it, and this was a restaurateur that's been involved in, top Michelin star restaurants, and it was the customer service and everything. But I'm in awe of a restaurant, especially those really successful restaurants that keep it going day after day after day. And I know I've done that with business and so forth, but I just feel like restaurants are at a different level, and there are so many things that could destroy a restaurant. Even a competitor can write a bad review, jump on it. I mean, it's so, it's such a volatile business because, one day you're on top of the world, you may not be the next day. But the really good people in that industry stay on top always. So, yes, when a business does come to me that, when there's a business model that I just don't agree with, or I like the entrepreneur but don't agree with their business model, don't love their business model, or they're in the food service restaurant business, I kind of stay away.
Yeah. Well, recently, I mean, a good example of that is, the issue that happened not too long ago with Dave Portnoy from Barstool Sports. I don't know if you saw that recently. he does the pizza slice testing. And he goes and tries out pizza and he gives it a rating. And he went to a place, I'm not going to name who it was because I don't want, I don't want to have any bad juju here, but the owner came out and they both had words in the middle of the street. And it created just a tremendous amount of bad publicity for the actual restaurant.
Yeah.
And he kind of slammed Dave and saying, you're terrible with helping small businesses and so forth. And he's like, I've made $50 million to help small business, and this whole big thing happened. But I mean, you could be an investor in a situation like that the owner goes out and ruins it by doing something stupid. I mean, this is, I hate to say that we're in because I mean, it really is true. And, depending on how you live, but we're in a time in the world where, cancel culture, which sucks, is a big thing to have to worry about. Are those things that you think about as well when, somebody comes in and say, okay, like, this is a really cool business, but the the guy behind it might be a little bit of a hothead or a little bit rough around the edges. And, could there be an issue down the road where our investment gets screwed because this guy goes out and does something really, really stupid? Or is there no way to really tell that? And you just kind of, hope for the best and, just look at the numbers and,
Well, yeah, again, you got to really understand, you got to be able to read the entrepreneur. And again, the reading of all this is not an exact science. So they could, go off the deep end and do some negative things about their company. I totally get it. I mean, there are people out there that just, want to put up a fight and, so it's, I guess it's hard to decipher. I mean, I've gotten better over the years in reading people, but it doesn't stop me from predicting what they're going to do tomorrow morning.
Right.
I've been wrong about people in the past, for sure.
Right.
I've invested in businesses that I thought were just going to be home runs. And then when I analyze, it always comes back to me that I analyze that, you know what, you weren't really excited about them as an entrepreneur. You invested in the business model. I invested in somebody that was just one business. She was just super smart, this woman. She was so intelligent, everything, but she just wasn't an entrepreneur. And, things fell apart very quickly, very quickly. And in the back of my mind, I said to myself, see, you went against what you normally do.
Right.
You went against the concept of the entrepreneur going down with the ship. You went with everybody else that goes, what a great idea, what an intelligent woman she is, and she just couldn't get out of her own way.
Sure, right.
It ruined the business. So yeah, man. I think I'm getting better at it, but I still going to make different mistakes.
Right. Are you able to, with that now, are you able to tell when somebody's coming in, what stage they're at, if they're, kind of early on, they're in the baby stage, they're not quite at the adolescent stage. Do you think you have a better concept after talking to them and doing some research and so forth that like, okay, they're right on the edge of moving into that next level. They might not realize it yet. Maybe you're able to see the possibility of the scaling potential when they're still kind of in like, I'm really trying to like just do all this on my own, really figure this out, which is obviously going to resonate with you and say, okay, cool. I like that. I like the fact that you're not talking about scaling, but in the back of your mind, you're like, man, you're right there.
You're ready.
Is that something that, is that something
we see. Yeah, we see that. Yeah. I see, there are people that don't know how good they're doing. I was a typical person like that. I used to beat myself up. I still do. Beat myself up, thinking I'm so good. I'm good at something. And I mean, beat myself up and act like I'm not good at it. And then I realize and I hear people say to me, you're really good at this. So, learning to, to get that feel around the business is important. But there are times we see that like, wow, this guy's got a tiger by the tail. I don't see any, any strong competition. I think he could take this way to the next level. I think he's being a little too cautious sometimes. You gotta, that goes back to the hidden path, right? You got to be able to be a little ambiguous about the future, at the same time with your feet planted on the ground. Remember, like that. What I was talking about was like that. You want to look at an entrepreneur and see those three pieces, and I'm trying to remember what they were. One was the ability to really want more than others want, like that you deserve more.
Yeah.
Coupled with I'm scared shit.
Yeah.
to move forward.
Right.
But I'm going to move forward anyway. But I'm scared. I'm dealing with fear. And third is I'm doing these two things going on in my head, and yet I'm remaining focused. Right. So those three pillars that I talked about, to me, is so important. I try to look at that when somebody's pitching. Is like, do they got that? Do they? It's good to see a little fear in them. I don't necessarily get so excited over people that are so positive of their results.
And what about
it's nice to be confident, but
yeah, that's what I was going to say. It can sometimes you look at somebody and say, I think you're a little bit too overconfident. You need to drop yourself down a peg. Do you ever say that to somebody, like when they are pitching, like, listen, man, like you have something here, but I think, or maybe you talk about it with the board and say, hey, listen, everything looks good, but man, the guy's way too confident, or the girl's way too confident, and they haven't been through that stuff yet.
Yeah, we've gotten pretty good. So, one of my partners, Richard Maggot, our fun soundboard, one of the things we do now is we actually do a test on the entrepreneurs and their team to see where their skills are and what they're good at, and whether it's almost like this is directions to this particular entrepreneur. When you get the results, and they're really accurate. I've done it with myself too. I know a lot about. I knew going in, but when you answer these questions, I mean, it's amazing. You answer these questions. I do it with all my teams, and my staff, and at Thrive. But you look at it and you go, this is what this person. A lot of my stuff is that I'm a bottom line type of person. I'm not detailed. I'm definitely big picture. And my goal is to, and I knew that. I always knew that, which is nice. And I always knew that I needed to get people to help me, move things forward, move the ball forward. I had the brilliant ideas, the bright ideas, but to get you nowhere without the, contemplation without action. And right. I when I was able to get somewhat successful, I was able to hire people that could make that work. It was difficult in the beginning, being maybe in a lot of ways a dreamer. That probably fueled some of my early unsuccessful businesses, that I was really good at the concept, the idea, getting things started, but not maintaining what I needed to maintain. And when I was able to hire people to do that, that's when things just lit up for me. Right. That's when my life changed. And I know you can relate to that in a lot of ways, because I know you well. You're a lot like me as far as, coming up with the conceptual idea. I think you're actually even a better facilitator in moving it forward. But ultimately, if I didn't find those people to help me, that their skills were so good at, moving things forward, that would have been I would have been stuck where I was.
Right. What's interesting there, what you just said, and I don't know if you've ever considered this, or if this has ever kind of crossed your mind, or anybody on the board or anything like that, but has there ever been anybody that comes in and you're thinking, like, I don't necessarily know if they're looking for an investment as much as they're looking for a mentor, and they're willing to give up some of their equity or whatever it ends up being because they need to be mentored. And, in a situation like that, where you're like, there really could be something here, is that kind of like an investment thing that you do at that point? Or is there something where like you kind of were like, or would that kind of move more into like the angel, type of thing where you're like, okay, listen, like, I think that I could help you and this is how it would work. But I think there's a lot of people out there that could use, the wisdom that VCs have, especially from the entrepreneur side, not necessarily the banker side. That's just, hey, we're willing to take risks because we have the money and, hopefully some of these pay off, which I think is, kind of the overall game. But do you see that too, that somebody's like, you don't need funding. What you're looking for is a mentor. You're looking for,
no, I actually have 2 companies right now, actually 3, that fit that realm, that I meet with them often. Younger, most of them are younger entrepreneurs. One's a little bit older, but out of the 3, 2 of them are younger, and they are interesting. I sit on kind of their board, but yes, kind of fit a role as a mentor. And I like that. I like doing that. I mean, unfortunately, you can't do it for everyone. There's a lot of them I would have liked to have, but I just, different times in my life when I'm available, not available. But
people have to be willing to take the advice too. A lot of people don't like to take advice. They feel like they're the expert or, whatever.
And these 3, I never put $1 into the businesses. One I'm considering. Now they've kind of gotten past some levels, so I'm considering that. The other 2 are really early, and I'm fine with helping them and kind of giving my advice, just like I'm doing here.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's because I coach, now, quite a few people, with what I'm doing. And, there's certain people that stand out more than others that are willing to take that advice, willing to take the, we're, letting them follow our footsteps in a way. And, I tell some of my students all the time, hey, look, you're following in the footsteps of what I've been working on for a number of years doing this. And, feel free to knock on my shoulder, occasionally when you're following those and say, hey, what's that thing over there? What should I be aware of that? Should I be careful with that? And, and I could say, okay, this is what you need to do. And some people will take that advice and say, you're right. Okay, I'll do that. And some people, it's like the person that asks for directions and you give it to them and they're like, yeah, there's got to be a better way. Like, then what do you ask for? So, I think that's a big part, is that people need to also be willing to take, that advice and understand that, hey, this is going to help me, move forward, in ways that I don't really see quite yet, but I need to know.
And you hit it right on the nose. I mean, there are some investments, they don't need me, and that's great. There's some of them I go, and I'm happy sitting on the sidelines. But ultimately I do like helping people because I've been through it. And, you want to be able to help those that are coming behind you. And you want to be able to, especially if you see, that fire in them, that they can really make it happen. There's a lot of people that just, have the fire, just don't know how to utilize it, don't know how to start. There's people in, awkward positions in life where they can't make the move from a job to starting a business, or they're disadvantaged. Love working with those people. All the people that need support and help. Love it. Yeah. That's probably the most satisfying thing to do.
Right.
I'm sure your coaching work that you do is just it's just a great feeling that you're helping people figure it out.
Especially when they listen. When they listen and they use the advice, and then you could see that it works for them. And, it's even one of those things. And, I don't even like to take the credit. I kind of like, hey, look, I'm not hiding anything. I'm not keeping anything against my chest or under my sleeve. I'm sharing this with you because I want you to be successful. You take the credit for that because you actually listened. because I could tell this to 10 different people, and maybe only a handful of them will actually take that advice. So, and I think that's another reason why too, when you reached out to me, about, hey, Craig, I'm at a point right now where I want to share, this wisdom that I have, because you have unique perspectives. And I mean, you've said it multiple times on here, even with, some of the members of the board will disagree with you on things, and you're not right 100% of the time, but there's certain intuition or whatever it might be that you feel or that you see that a lot of other entrepreneurs or investors or anybody may not be able to do. And that's what you're able to, to really share. And that's why I really, I when I suggested the podcast concept to you, I was extremely happy that you said, yeah, because I think this is, it's great that I'm able to learn this stuff as well. Because it's stuff that I try to study and I tell my students this too. You can go and find experts out there, but are you wise enough, or do you have enough knowledge or experience to know what's the relevant information and what's the information that isn't? And I think you're able to figure that out and really kind of share that in a way that's very different, but at the same time resonates with a lot of people. So, I appreciate you hopping on and doing these podcasts and these interviews. And, again, you're just a wealth of information. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share on this episode before we close?
I want to also return the favor. You are a wealth of information for me too. I learned a lot from you over the years, and and I'm still learning. I mean, I think, I guess the big thing to share is that we're all humans, and we all make mistakes, and we all, we have our philosophies on life. We have our theories. I'm sharing my theories, right? I'm sharing that, that stuff. But I'm not always right. I've had a good run.
Sure, right.
I love what I do. I love the day to day of it because, if I can help someone, that's great. And if I learn something, that's great. So
right.
I got two things coming. I learn when I'm teaching sometimes.
Yeah.
I even learn for myself sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But we do, right? We look at it, we go, but at the same time, I'm happy to be able to share my insight because, that's all I got.
Right.
My insight.
That's and there's a lot of insights that you've shared, and I can't wait to keep sharing them, with you. And again, thanks so much for joining. I know that you're away. That's why we're not in person like some of our others. So enjoy yourself for the next bit, and we will catch all of you on the next episode. Thanks so much for listening. Take care.